Hello students, this video is intended for the General English uh, paper Environmental Studies for the semester 2 students of Kerala University. Uh, and I'm dealing with the unit 4.3 coping with personal emergency situations. So this unit deals with how you deal with a personal crisis. So the steps that you have to keep in mind, that the knowledge that you have to be prepared with in order to tackle such a situation. Because when such a crisis situation comes upon you, usually we have such heightened emotional responses that we are not really able to tackle the situation. We are not able to do the things that are supposed to be done in order to alleviate that situation. So we need to know what are the correct things to do in such a situations. That is the knowledge that will help you to face any crisis, to come through such a crisis, any crisis in a better fashion. So in such a situation with the knowledge, if you're prepared with the knowledge, you won't feel lost, and you can have the ability to manage that situation. So in usual cases, if you face such a situation, you're likely to be overcome with emotions of confusion, and then later on also, even if you happen to survive the situation unscathed, afterwards also you have all sorts of disturbances, emotional disturbances. You feel depressed, you feel guilty, you think over what all things you could have done better. You think you feel panicked about with thoughts about whether such a situation will come upon you again, and then you feel irritated and angry with yourself. So things that you commonly describe as the post-traumatic stress disorder. So such feelings will bother you, will haunt you even after you have gone through a emergency situation. So in order to alleviate that, so if you have the ability to, if you have the knowledge, if you have the preparedness to manage emergencies, you can cope that with that emergency, you can manage that emergency, come out of it in a relatively unscathed fashion, and you have the confidence to know that you can manage anything. So it will only boost your confidence, and you will not be exposed to emotional turmoil as in other cases. And this is one important thing that you have to keep in mind. Preparedness is very, very important when you think about emergency situations. All of us have this sort of complacent feeling that emergencies are not something that's going to happen to us. We hear a lot of stories about things that happen to our friends, to people whom we know about, or maybe to strangers, read about news reports, but then somehow you feel that it's not going to happen to you. Somehow you get through life without the need for such a training. But this is a very um, wrong way of thinking, and we need to be prepared, at least the next generation. So this unit is prescribed for you in the syllabus, so that the next generation, the youth of this country, can be prepared to meet any sort of challenge that will arise in life. For society as a whole, you will have that preparedness. So in at home also, you need to be prepared to meet any sort of emergency. You need to have your first aid box. You need to have all sorts of things that will help you to face any sort of fire hazard, or any sort of emergency that can arise. And the first aid training that can be received at healthcare centers, that is also another things that is also something that can prove invaluable in certain situations. And to familiarize you with this notion, with this topic, or to make you aware of the necessity of this preparedness, is an extract from Patna Blues. Patna Blues is a novel by Abdullah Khan, and it was published a couple of years ago. He is an Indian writer, and this novel was published after literally being edited, being rewritten hundreds of times. So the protagonist is a Muslim youth, a Bihari youth, who falls in love with Hindu woman, a older woman, and an unsuitable match by society's standards, and how he deals with that, how he uh, his growth. He is somebody who is wants to prepare for who's an IAS aspirant, and the novel deals with the relationship and the growth of the protagonist as such. But in this extract, you have the meeting between them, which takes place in a park, and he is a student at the time. He's a BSc honors student, at a college student, so a late teen, or the beginning of his 20s. That's a very young man at the time. And he meets. He's sitting in the park. He's reading a book of poems. He has a diary with him and a book of poems, a poem by the poet Momin Khan Momin. So that book is called Diwane Momin. So the book of ghazals, book of songs. It contains ghazals, and he's reading that and he's meditating on that. And that is when he encounters this woman, a tall, slender woman in a black sari, and she's accompanied by her father, an emaciated old man, a very thin old man, and they are both walking slowly in his direction. So Arif is wearing a wind cheater, a zipped up garment, because it's a windy area, and he's wearing this jacket with close-fitting neck, waistband, and cuffs, and he's reclining in the in the park. Next, and as soon as he sees the woman, so he's taken by her beauty, and immediately he writes a few lines of poetry in his diary, scribbling in Urdu. Her body is like marble, her beauty is incomparable, her face more beautiful than a full moon. Her dresses are black, and so are her robes. These are the lines that he writes. So comparing her dress, the black dress to her black hair, and comparing her body to marble, and her beauty, which cannot really be described. So he's attracted to her, and it writes about her in his diary. And he overhears a conversation between them, because the woman seems to be concerned about her father, and she asks him, "How are you feeling, Babuji? How are you feeling?" And but the old man doesn't give any response, and the woman looks very anxious. She looks around and tries to shake the old man a little bit, but then there doesn't seem to be any response. She looks around again. And her voice becomes louder, shriller, and there's nobody else around. And Arif is the only one there, and so he clutches his diary and book and goes over there to help. And he's the only one person who has come forward to help. And Arif understands by seeing the situation that it's a cardiac arrest. So the man has had a cardiac arrest. His heart has stopped beating, and that is an emergency situation that Arif faces there. So instead of shouting for help himself, he knows what to do. So fortunately, he happens to be trained to handle such an emergency situation, and he takes the steps that are necessary to resuscitate the man. He kneels down beside the man and keeps his hand near his nose to see if he was breathing. So you have to make sure whether the man is breathing or not first. So by keeping his hand near the nose, he makes sure whether he was breathing. And so there's no breath. And he immediately places his right hand on the brow of the man and his left hand under his chin, and slowly opens his mouth. So he keeps his one hand on top of the brow and the other on his chin, and opens his mouth. And he fortunately happens to have a tissue paper with him, and he makes a hole in that and places it on top of the mouth of the man. and lowered his mouth to touch the victim's mouth and slowly breathed in. So giving mouth-to-mouth respiration. Waited for 30 seconds, then breathed in again. So this is supposed to be done with an interval of 30 seconds, and he does that a couple of times, and then he moved towards the chest. So this is something that you have videos of in on YouTube. You might have seen it in many movies. The first aid that is being given to people who've gone into cardiac arrest. So the both hands are placed on the chest and pressed downwards. So left hand below and the right one above. So keeping both like this, pressing down, and this is supposed to kickstart the heart. And this is being compared. Arif Khan, while he's doing this, he remembers how he had kick-started his father's old scooter. So that mechanism is what is being applied to the human heart in this situation, because you press down on it and then you give the respiration 30-second with 30-second interval through the mouth. And pushing down, he looked up at the woman, and the woman was crying. Tears were flowing down her cheeks, and so Arif instructs her, go to the park exit and see if there is a taxi parked there. So the next thing that is to be done is to take the man to a hospital. So once the first aid is given, it's not that the patient is out of danger. So the medical assistance or the medical treatment that is necessary has to be given. So the next step is to arrange for transportation to the hospital. So either an ambulance has to be summoned or a taxi has to be summoned. So here the man is telling the woman to go and see whether a taxi is available. And he also assures her, because the woman is rather nervous about leaving her father with a total stranger, but he assures her that he's equipped to deal with the situation, that he's trained to deal with such situations. So he has that first aid training. And so she goes off to see about the taxi, and Arif continues this to resuscitate the father of the woman. So he pushes down 2-inch deep. So the pressure that is given on the chest. So you're supposed to push down 2 inches, and then the pressure is relaxed. And this is also to be repeated at intervals. And after some time, after about 30 times, so it's not just 2 or 3 times you do this and then you leave off, you give up. You have to keep it for some time. So after about 30 compression depths, there is a response from the victim. The man slowly opens his eyes and looked around. And Arif assures him that you're in safe hands, and the girl has gone to get the taxi, and we will take you to the hospital immediately. And the girl comes back with a taxi driver who's actually known to Arif and a man named Habib, and together they help the man to the taxi. And the woman and the father get in, and Arif also accompanies them because he feels responsible and he wants to make sure that they get to the hospital safely. And on the way, they encounter another emergency. So this is the medical emergency that he encounters first, that he is prepared to deal with, he has dealt with successfully. And now on the way to the hospital, they have to encounter another blockade, another emergency. So there is a strike taking place. So certain youths, a number of young people are gathered. They are striking, conducting a strike, and banners are everywhere. There are barricades everywhere. Traffic is not being allowed through that route. And 60 to 70 young men are there. They are chanting slogans, squatting on the ground. They're not letting people move there. And this is an emergency situation. They have to get to the hospital immediately. So whatever benefit has been reaped by the emergency first aid that has been given by Arif, that could go waste if the man doesn't get to the hospital immediately. So that sense of urgency is there, and but the people are blocking the way. And Arif volunteers to get out of the taxi and go and speak to them, but it doesn't really work. And he tries to tell them that he has an emergency, that there is an old man with him, and he has to get him to the hospital. But the young men really are not really concerned about that. He says that we are young people, our issues are more important, and we have to protest about that, and we are not concerned about any old man. So we are not going to move from there. And when Arif becomes more insistent, they try to beat him up. They surround him, and he's almost about to get beaten up when the woman comes to his rescue. When the woman pleads with them, asks them to let him go, and then they allow him to go. And fortunately for them, at that time, you have the police arriving, and the police announces to them that the people who are conducting the students who have gathered there, they are supposed to disperse at that time. And because of that, because of the action of the police, the protesters disperse, and they are able to get to the hospital. And when they get to the hospital, and of course, it is the police scattering the protesters means there is a sort of encounter between them, the students throwing stones, and the police wielding their lathis. So this is after all this that the road gets cleared up, and the taxi speeds through the street and reaches the hospital, and the woman goes with him, and Arif pays the fare. Luckily, he has some pocket money with him. He has got that very morning, and he is able to pay the taxi fare, and he waits for the woman. And after some time, they get the information that he has been taken for some tests, and he doesn't seem to be in any immediate danger. The man whom Arif has saved, so his respiration has stopped, but then he managed to resuscitate him and get him to the hospital. And the woman comes and thanks him for his help, and thanks him for saving her father's life. So he's the hero of the story. Because he knew that first aid procedure, he was able to save that man's life and get the gratitude of the young woman for whom he felt so much admiration at the very first sight. And he introduces himself as Arif Khan, and that he is studying BSc Honours. And this woman, who happens to be a little bit older than him. So according to old world etiquette, it is not really polite to ask the name of a woman who's older than you. So he refrains from asking the woman's name, but he has done his good deed for the day, and all this is possible because of the preparedness, because he was prepared, because he was knowledgeable about the procedure. And let us just take a look at the key concepts that are given. These are the abbreviations that can be asked in the examinations. One is ACS or acute coronary syndrome. So this is a case in which the arteries that carry blood and oxygen and nutrients to the heart, they get blocked. So when there are blockages in the arteries, heart attacks can happen, and the blood supply isn't enough, the pumping isn't enough, enough blood is not reaching the heart, and heart attack can occur. And the heart attack, which is otherwise known as a myocardial infarction. So ACS is acute coronary syndrome. Then CPR is the cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So this is what Arif has done in this extract of Patna Blues, the novel Patna Blues, a medical technique for reviving someone whose heart is stopped by pressing on their chest and breathing into their mouth. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. And recovery position. Recovery position is the part in which the position in which the victim has to be placed to ensure that he is in a position, that his airways are clear and open, and any fluid or vomit doesn't get into his airways to choke them. So the position that you have to place the victim in. So if you don't place the victim in a recovery position, you cannot ensure that he will make a recovery. So maybe a person who is drowned, person who is sick, who is vomiting, who is a person who has gone into seizures. If you do not know the proper recovery position, then that first aid process is not might not be that effective. Then stroke is another medical emergency. I'm sure you've all heard that term a lot. But this is where the oxygen and nutrients does not reach the brain. Adequate nutrients and oxygen does not reach the brain because of a blood clot or bleeding in the brain. So sometimes a blood vessel can rupture, then bleeding can occur in the brain. So it's a blockage of the nutrients and blood reaching the brain. Then STEMI or STEMI, STEMI or ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. So STEMI occurs when a coronary artery becomes completely blocked. So earlier when you talked about ACS or acute coronary syndrome, you have blockages there, but then still a little bit of blood might be flowing there. But when there is STEMI is when a coronary artery, artery which supplies blood to the heart, becomes completely blocked, and a large portion of the muscle stops receiving blood. So heart muscle, a large portion of that muscle stops receiving blood, and it is a serious heart attack. And after a heart attack, the evidence that a heart attack has occurred is when the muscle is damaged. When you do the medical investigations, you will find that a portion of the muscle has become damaged, and so that is one way in which, even if the victim hasn't really reported a heart attack or hasn't really been hospitalized at the time of the heart attack, you can find evidence of this through such damages. And this has the classic symptom of pain in the center of the heart, not towards one side or towards the shoulder, but a pressure or tightness rather than a sharp pain. It's in the center of the chest itself. And some people who experience STEMI also describe feeling pain in one or both arms and their back, neck, or jaw. So these are the symptoms of STEMI. So these are the concepts, these are things, emergencies that you need to be familiar with. The terms that you need to be familiar with, some of the situations that you need to be prepared for, need to anticipate in your lives, at some point in your life, somewhere. And maybe you can bring relief, and maybe you can save the life of someone. Thank you.